morning, and welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips with me, your host, Anne, and disembodied hands, Quinty, Justin, and John. And hopefully everything is working. Is everything working? Lord. I'm just like technology, just go. Just jump off a cliff. I can't tell it to do that right now because we have to stream. But after this stream, go jump off a cliff, technology. Yeah, it's back. It's back. We're back. We're here. Phew. Morning, everybody. And Missed Him, thank you for the resub. 25 months. Dang. That's a lot of months. It's one more month than singable. Hello, Raven Day. Hello. All right, so let us ogre. We're gonna red today. We're gonna red. I'm seeing red. I'm gonna red. Red time. So yeah, let's add in some red and see what we can do with this. I will need to bring it up pretty saturated, but I'm going to start with Ogre, one of my favorite Pathfinder reds. It's a very dark, beautiful, warm red. Hello, Bob and Julie. Yes, apologies to everybody for no stream yesterday. My internet completely tanked and didn't come back until much later in the morning, which, you know, happens from time to time out here. Most of the time, it's good. Today, it's good. And we'd had a long stretch there where it had been just pretty much perfect. So I guess it had to hit eventually. Every once in a while, this happens. Comcast just decides to go, nope. Let's see here. So I'm going to start with this. I probably won't go darker, except for my lining. So I'm going to just go ahead and pop this into my palette. At least I'm going to pokey tool it and then pop it into my palette. So for those who don't know about Ogre Red, it is one of the very beautiful, unique reds in the MSP Pathfinder line. I like to promote the Pathfinder colors because there's some very unique ones in that line. Some of the light blues, some of these beautiful reds. I'm going to go a little bit more than I need because we want... There it is. See that beautiful dark red? Isn't that lovely? I like it. A lot of the dark reds in MSP are colder. They tend to slide toward purple, and the reason for that is that that's how our black pigment, which is a lamp black, a coal black, that's how that tends to affect red pigments. So often slide toward purple or toward brown. This one's a bit warmer. It's like a nice brick color. So I really like it to start with. It's much resembles, I mentioned this yesterday before the stream completely tanked, but it much resembles a Vallejo color I used to use, which was a burnt cadmium maroon, but I'm much happier not using cadmiums these days. So we managed to get good coverage with the Ogre just fine without it. Let me grab my mixing thing, and wow, I'm getting low on my water. I forgot to refill. I'm going to have to make sure I address that today. I could just use my paint water with my brush, but, you know, I do like my dropper bottle. I will admit, I do like it, but I'll just put a regular brush water in there. I don't really need the, it's not like I need special water for a base coat. I'm not using anything with flow improver in it. I'm just using regular water, so brush water works just fine. Alrighty. Yay! So this is gonna actually base coat a lot of our remaining territory on this guy. I want to do red up here. I am likely doing red here and here also. The burlap sack I'm kind of out on. The problem with the burlap is just that it's going to be like, if I make it burlap colored, it's going to be the same color as the rest of his, you know, it's going to be too close to his skin. So I either have to like dye the burlap a different color, or just ignore it, or make it a dark, really dark, like dark color, like it's been stained, or I don't know. I haven't decided quite what to do with it. But I think I'm pretty fair in going for red on the leather and the cloth here and on these straps up here. So I'm going to do it. When I paint ogres are sometimes one of the most boring humanoids just because they, you know, they don't usually have a lot of room on them for color. And often you're painting, you know, brownish skin, brownish leather, you know, brownish fur. It can get very monochrome with ogres. And I mean, they're monsters, right? So it's not like you're usually painting them to a high level like we're doing with this guy. yesterday when it had a chance of being today. Today is all right. I'm gonna like say jury's out, but it's Friday, so it's automatically upgraded. Kind of like when you get your exit row upgrade, you know, it's automatically a better flight. So this is automatically a better day because it's Friday. I did forget, it looks like I neglected some lining on the outside of this, so I'll have to pick that up. Now, starting this, it's going to look very close to our initial brown, but as we work with it, it will, of course, come up. This is the shadow of the red. I like, if I want a red to be really poppy, to really have depth to it, I find that starting dark and working light is the way I like to do reds. Sometimes I start a little lighter than this, but today I decided I wanted to use Ergothoa Red. So we have little clip fasteners, little bits of metal he's put around his straps to hold them onto his big old club. Yeah, David gets a long weekend too. I don't think Reaper does, though. Right, Quindy? Is President's Day the first day? The next day we have off? In February, is it? I never remember the little odd Reaper holidays. I only remember the big ones. But I know we have one somewhere. But I don't think that it's this one. Yeah, that's nice that they're recognizing Martin Luther King Day. I think the only reason Reaper doesn't is that when Dave added the extra paid holidays, he wanted to kind of spread out the days throughout the year, so. Well, yeah, we recognize it. No, it's not this one, I'm pretty sure, Quindy, because it's too soon after New Year's. I remember it being spread out. I mean, everybody recognizes it, but whether you get it off is another thing. Smaller companies often can't afford to offer as many paid days off, so totally get it. But yes, I think we all observe it. Because Martin Luther King was a pretty cool dude, if I say so myself. All right. Frame dropping. Interesting. Let me look. I have my speed test up, so I can run it again. Let's go. All right. I'm going to run it while I do this. And I'll probably make the shield red also. I like to, especially with big old humanoids, where they're kind of simple. Yeah, my frame rate is not optimal. It's not terrible, but my upload is not awesome. It's about half of what it normally is, which means it's not completely tanking, but it's not awesome either. Twitch isn't, or OBS isn't giving me an alert yet. So let's hope that it pops back, since it's not totally awful. Come on. Come on, Comcast. I mean, there's a possibility that they're doing work on lines or something, and that's why this is happening, but I hope it's not. So yeah, I like to start dark with reds because I find that I tend to keep my shadows darker that way, and it looks like it has more depth than if I start with a bright red and try to shade it down. I find it doesn't work for me as well because the bright red is just so bright. I end up like punishing it with shading, and at that point I may as well have just like started dark and worked light. It would have been the same amount of time. Yeah, it's on my end, guys. How's the sound, though? Because I'm not, like, doing anything super important right now. Let me, once again, check my speed test. Audio's good. Yeah, it is me. It's on my end. I'm going to run another speed test to see. But we can blame Comcast, as always. So, going over something like this shield here, I'm just going to do the whole thing. Ooh, my upload is diving. We may have a problem, Houston. Come on. Yeah. All right, we're going to finish this shield quick, and we're going to hope that my internet comes back. This is so crock. I hate it. Like, we go for months with no problems, and then suddenly, boom! Comcast decides to just tank the stream. Hello. Yeah, so I'm going to go over this entire thing with the red. I'm not going to waste time trying to paint around the little details. It's much easier to just paint everything red and then to go over the details with, usually with walnut and then with a base coat for my NMM. Since we are doing NMM on this, we are back to NMM after doing a ton of metallics. Also, the bronze golem may be out. Just to let you know, I may, David heard me like cussing at it last week or this week, and he hid it. He stole it off my shelf and he hid it. He's like, just tell them I hid it somewhere and you can't find it, because my boyfriend is hilarious. Sorry, fiance. I always have to upgrade him. I always forget to upgrade him. All right, let me see. Just keeping an eye on my upload here, guys. Just trying to keep an eye on my speed because I know it's choppy for a lot of you. So if you see me like tapping things, it's because I'm running speed tests to keep an eye on it to see how bad it is. But yes, so we're going to do NMM on this, which includes the chainmail on the front. A lot of the NMM is just little things, so it's not like a big deal. Like, this isn't a bad model to practice NMM on, actually, all things considered. The chainmail, as you will see, chainmail NMM is actually very easy. Here's another one where we can choose to either paint around the ropes or just paint over everything and go over the ropes afterwards. And I think I'm just going to paint over everything. It's much faster. It gets the base coat done faster. So this is Urgathoa Red. It's a Pathfinder color. It's 89508. While you're picking it up, you should also pick up its friend Asmodius Red, which is also beautiful and a great highlight for this color. This is a great color, a great red to shade with purple. Because it's so dark already that you can introduce some kind of complex purple shadows and have them kind of be subtle, so they don't smack you in the face. How is my upload is kind of going, it's kind of shrinking, guys. My upload is kind of shrinking. Slowly. It's toying with us. What I don't get is how Comcast gets away with this when so many people are still working from home, especially now. I mean, with the current surge in the plague, it's like, really, Comcast? All the people who have to like do their Zoom and, you know, Google Talk stuff, and you are playing around with upload speeds? The upload keeps creeping down. This is not good. So I did do brown on the other ankle, as you can see. Yeah, I'm going to just run with it. Yeah, it's a really good red. I don't know why I wouldn't use speed test. It tells me what I want to know. It's not like using like fast.com is going to like give me a different answer. Although because it's obvious that we have issues, so I don't think that it's going to tell me a better it's going to give me a better speed. But yes. Speed test is fast, so it's just what I'm using. Alrighty, so we've got brown. As you can see, I repeated my brown also. The brown on the wood up here is also the brown on the barrel, and it's also the brown down here on the leather. We'll be highlighting them a little bit differently, but the base, a couple of colors will still be the same, which gives us a nice repeat. You don't really have to repeat neutrals like that if you don't want to, but I like to do it. Still just choppy so far. That's good, Quindy. Yeah. Yeah, right, exactly. See, I've got 800/40 most of the time, Miss Dim. We pay for extra internet because I have to do this stream every day. But yeah, your quality does vary for sure. Yeah, and OBS did pop up a frame rate warning when we went below 8, so. Well, let's just get this base coated, then we can start highlighting and putting our lining in to block out some of these other things that are going to be a little bit different color. But yeah, I like to have a bit of a splash of color on ogres, but I do tend to go for red. It makes the most sense. Oh, hey, my upload's back. Woo, it bounced back up, guys. We're back. It should have fixed itself if it didn't refresh because my upload just went back up to 34, Quindy. So it should be good now. Let's hope that was just a little hiccup and that it is going to stay good for the rest of today. Comcast heard me cursing it. It should be back, Shadow Raven. It should be back now. I just did a speed test and it's like up. Really up, like where it should be. So. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we will be good for the rest of that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I figure speed test is just as fine as anything. Like, as far as I just like to get a general idea, and it will give me a general idea. Like, when speed test tells me that things are dire, things are actually dire in my experience. And when speed test says that things are good, things are generally good. So. Oh, and I totally forgot to line between the bracer and the hand. See that? Well, we are gonna go back in with our liner. So. Boop. There we are. I remember to line the top, just not the bottom. And this is, you know, this is the never-ending story of being a mini painter, right? Ooh, should we make his collar red? I think we should make his collar red. If you're going to wear a dog collar, it deserves to be red. Sadly, he does not have a nameplate that we can put Fido on. Really interesting. Let me see if it went back down. Because it was great there for a minute. It's like, Comcast, stop messing with us. It's a good thing I'm just base coating and not doing anything like extremely fascinating. Yeah, it's tanking again. Oh, actually it's going up and down. It's really weird. It started out at like 4 and then it just went back up to 30. And above 30. Yeah. This is an ogre, actually. More shadow. Hold on, let me get back to like, we're just gonna go forward, guys, and you know, if you still get twitchy stuff. Yeah, it's the upload roller coaster. That's what we're on. You're right. It's going back and forth. So yeah, this is an ogre guard, and this is the metal version because the bones version is so popular. We were out of it when I went to make my order for minis. But I really like him. This guy's a real chunk, though. He is heavy. Heavy metal. But I like the detail I get on the metal. Until he shows up in Bones USA. This is good. I have to get behind that ear. But yeah, the upload's going to go down and up. As long as it doesn't completely tank and kick us like to the curb, I'm good. So we're just going to go forward. Move ahead. All right. And for those who I just got Whippet stuck in their head by Devo, I'm not really sorry. All right, we are almost settled with our base coat, and then we are going to we'll grab a highlight. We'll start with our little highlights. How about that? I have some ideas about how I want to highlight this red that's a little bit different because I want it to be kind of faded out, a little grungy. So I'm not going to do my usual highly saturated highlight scheme. Instead, I'm going to echo a little bit of the red that we did on the Knowles sash, except we're going to bring it up even a little bit more sketchy, faded. Am I going to keep this or am I going to... So when you do a light base coat, you'll often get this effect of a heavy wash. Do you guys see that? And it's up to you whether you just want to work with that, see how it's kind of almost formed a wash. It's really heavy wash, but it has outlined things, and there are definitely darker and lighter areas. When you go over white primer, this will sometimes happen, especially with colors that tend toward a natural transparency. And you can use it. You can just like use it as a guide to where you want to put your highlights and just do that. Or you can go back over it and make it really a solid base coat. That is up to you. As you can see, it's much darker up over the previous base coat than it is down here over the white, where it gave us that wash, that wash feel. So I think I'm going to go over it here, down here on the cloth at least. I want a solid base. But it is perfectly acceptable to just paint over when it's this sort of effect and just use it as a guide. I used to do that a lot. This used to be my base coat, is the kind of almost a heavy wash base coat. And then I would work with it from there. But lately I find I like a little bit more solid on my base. It also, your paint will be more durable if you put down a more solid base as far as holding onto the mini. How are we now, guys? How is our connection? Are we still riding the roller coaster of refresh? Or have we stabilized somewhat? There we go. All right. And you can still see that you can see the same effect here on the... See how we've got a light and dark going on, like a heavy wash? So once again, you can either work with that. A little bouncy. All right. Well, we'll just work with it. But yeah, and you can see it here too. So it's up to you whether you really want to just work with that as it stands, or if you want to put more paint on it. It's up to you. It depends on the surface. Yeah. But I'm going to be working with a fairly, still pretty dark red over the top of this. So I think I do want that extra layer. But yeah, you don't have to. It is, if I was like going over this with something like a thinned clear red, I would be just fine just starting with that kind of heavy wash base coat. So for me, it kind of depends on how much I'm layering up my, my subsequent layers. How fast my color is going to go up and how dark the first layer is going to be. Going to have to make these little straps a little bit different color also. So I have to watch that. But yeah, other colors that I would feel okay using on an Ogre would be stuff like kind of sickly greens, maybe blue grays or dark blues that are weathered. You could totally go in that direction. I just like red because Ogres are bloody-minded things, and also like the oxblood color is a very easy dye. And this kind of mimics that oxblood color. historical oxblood. There we are. Getting this all down. Sweet. Okay, everybody is happy. Let us mix a highlight color. Hold on. Dropping frames there. Oh, come on, Comcast. There isn't a lot I can do about it, sadly. If it's going to be that way. Although it does make me think that maybe they have been doing something to their system over the last two days. Because it's all of a sudden. All right, let's mix a highlight color. So I mentioned that there's a great Pathfinder color that's a good highlight for this called Asmodius Red. Nope, not that. Nope, not that. As I reach for various things over in... There it is. I need to order another bottle of this. Yeah, my upload's dicey, but not bad right now. So... No, it's doable. It's doable. It's certainly not enough to make me cancel the stream. All right, so let's work with Asmodius for our highlight. And of course, it wants to clog today. So these colors make an excellent highlight and shadow for each other. They're both from Pathfinder. They're subsequent numbers. Asmodius is 89507 and Urgathoa is 89508. They're both lovely colors. Let me clear the clog out on this one. You can see the difference between them there. So they really are very nice complements for each other as far as highlight and shadow. They're just a natural progression. You could go up from there to like Heraldic Red or Dragon, or not Dragon. Heraldic Red or Blood Red probably would both be fine highlights. Yeah, for sure. Yes, the leather straps on the club are going to be painted with the same color. Much as most ogres probably would not color coordinate, I like to color coordinate my ogres. So if this was my ogre henchman, I would be color coordinating my ogres. And since red is probably going to get splashed all over them anyway, you may as well make their clothing red because, you know. All right, let's see here. And the color that I really liked that we made for the knoll, remember, was a 4-to-1 of Asmodius plus 1 drop of orange brown, which I think I still have around here hanging out. Hanging out with the orange brown. Let's look. Yeah, 9201. Yeah, people don't read. We know. Well, since we actually do talk directly in the stream about the fact that our connection is not great. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry, everybody watching this on YouTube. Hashtag blame Comcast. I'm going to do 1 drop of orange brown. Again, man, it's the day for clogged bottles. Orange brown, guys. Everything's muted here, where we're living in Ogre Land. Everything is a muted color, so don't want to go too bright with our red. And so I'm just going to do a beautiful little highlight color with this, mixed into my Asmodius. It's going to take it slightly lighter and warmer. And it's also going to kind of fade it out, so it's not quite as vibrant. Because although this ogre is pretty darn yellow, I did mix normal skin colors into him to bring that color down. And if you recall, we had to dampen down the color on the loincloth as well. So, the fur. So I'm going to be ready for that and dampen down this color it'll come out to be a warmer, lighter brick red, which actually is a little bit better of a highlight, I think. From here, we can really fade it. So further highlights, using this color, I'm going to be mixing in something weird, maybe even a skin tone, to fade it out and make it more weathered looking. But we're going to cover a fair amount of ground with this color, so we still keep it red. Maybe because it's more less humid in some climates, War Shadow, although I'm not sure where you live. No, that makes sense, Quindy. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you put the warning up, at least you can say there is a warning in the comments. You can never completely keep people from complaining. But yes, you can warn them. This is true. I'm actually kind of amazed how many people get on and watch like VODs of entire past streams. I guess when you want the background noise, so what I'm doing here is I'm going to be stippling. Let me get this out of the frame so you guys can actually see it. There we go. All right, so I'm going to be stippling on highlights here because it's leather. I don't necessarily need a very smooth transition. It also allows me to leave a little bit of my previous dark red around these studs that are in the leather. And it will let me build up my highlights with a bit of texture to them as well. This is thinned about, I want to say about a 3-to-1. My best guess, I think. Maybe a 2.5-to-1. It's about 5 drops and I think 2 drops of water. And so chances are the texture won't show up too much in this initial layer because this red is still pretty close to the dark. It's when you start mixing in much lighter colors that then you start to see more brush strokes, and then you're going to really be suggesting your texture. But sometimes I like to start at earlier stages just to get myself in the proper mindset for building up texture. And it never hurts to have just a little bit of suggested texture from the get-go, in my opinion, on some of this stuff, like leather. Now, on edges like this, then I may just go with a straight brush stroke because there's no room, really, down here. I'll be able to suggest more splitting and stuff with my next color up, so I don't want to waste a lot of time down there. Hey, VCR, yeah, it's been a while. Yeah, we had to cancel yesterday because my internet was just awful. Awful. It's a no good, terrible, very bad internet yesterday. On the plus side, I got a lot of writing done because that's what I do when I don't have a stream in the morning. I actually got a lot done yesterday in general. It was a very productive day yesterday. So again, and if you wanted to do kind of a dragon scale pattern on here, this is the same kind of brushstroke you would use, like just kind of creating little splotches and dots. Let's see if we can get close enough to see. You can kind of see it there, kind of the little splotches and dots, see? And if you continue to double down on that pattern, you're going to end up with kind of a scaly hide look. Maybe we'll do that over here since this is pretty smooth surface. We can actually suggest like it's kind of a lizard scale or dragon scale kind of thing. That makes sense. That makes sense, Eric, that they're your background noise, and they're a painting related background noise too. So, and sometimes you might even absorb a new info, right? So I guess that makes sense. I'm always surprised when I get a new patron from my YouTube, just because it's like, wow, really? You sat through all that? now that I'm doing shorter videos for YouTube, that'll change a little bit, but And with that lead in, hey guys, I've got a Patreon, as many of you know, because many of you are my patrons, which is so awesome. But yes, I have a Patreon, and it's cool. You should check it out. I even just made a free public post yesterday to go with my YouTube video about washes. That summarizes it for you and shows the end result. So it's patreon.com/paintingbig. I do a lot of fun stuff there. The $10 and $15 tiers are a huge bargain because you get all the lower tier content as well. So you get a lot of content per month. And for those who have been considering joining the Paint Along tier, we are starting 2 new models in February. We are finishing up our Tara, our Bombshell Tara, this month with the basing. And we're doing both a bust and a 28 millimeter for our new Paint Along models for my Patreon. So now may be the time, if that sounds appealing to you. So here on the cloth, I'm not doing the stippling. Here on the cloth, I'm doing my normal, kind of smoother, typical layering. I'm going to build up a couple levels of this. You can see how it's coming up very nicely, though. Yeah, I wanted to do 2 different ones because the 28 millimeter at least is a little bit more affordable. Though sometimes I know there's somebody in a country that couldn't order either. I'm not sure what country they're in, but the bust is European and it's more expensive. So I wanted to still, but then you guys chose the most expensive model on the 28 millimeter front too. So I'm like, oh well. So we're doing, for those who wonder, we're doing Dark Sword's Marika, Guardian of the Sea, the one with the awesome tentacles and trident. And it's Marika, who used to paint for Reaper and who still comes to ReaperCon to talk about science and stuff. So yeah, the gang decided, I had people vote. I chose the bust myself, but because I thought it would be a good topic. It has a lot of different stuff going on. There we go. So a couple of layers of the red to bring it up. You can see how we're bringing it up here. Let me get a little closer. And you can see the highlights and shadows. They are subtle, but that's, if you want blended stuff, that's what you're going for. You're going for subtlety at first. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. And I just don't have the time to coordinate it. So hopefully some patron will be able to help that person. That's my hope. But at any rate, thank you everybody for your support on the Patreon. It keeps me afloat. It enables me to keep doing Reaper streams. It saves me from having to go back to corporate America. At which point I would have to stop doing this stream. We have to at least keep the Patreon going until I can get a puppy. I need to raise the puppy working from home. This is much better. But actually the Patreon's doing great, so I'm very happy. Alrighty. So again, that upper edge, I forgot to hit it before. I'm just going to hit it kind of with the edge of my brush. Just needs a little bit of highlight on it. It'll show up a little better as we bring up more highlights. It's such a small area that you don't need to worry about it too much. You just want to make sure. Hey, Twisted. Good deal. Okay, so now up here at the top, once again, we're not going to worry too much about texture, but I do want to leave the shadow color in the middle of these straps. So I'm going to be concentrating my highlight color around both sides. You can even see, if you look closely, see how the straps dip in the middle? That tells you that the edges are, are probably more like water's gotten into them. They're more swollen. They're puffy. They're probably splitting. That sort of effect happens when leather gets kind of, tired. and worn. So I'm going to be doing that and I'm going to start by just making essentially a light stripe around the outside edge of both sides. I'm not going to worry about blending this really because these colors are close enough that it'll probably give me the effect I want anyway. So just like that. And this is the advantage of using a highlight color that's not too different from your shadow. It has to be different enough. It has to give you the foundation to start with. But once you've got those two stripes and once they've started to blend in, you can see as they dry, they really are blending in pretty well. Once you've got those two stripes, then in your next layers, you can suggest more texture. Now I will be painting in that center up on the top of each of these because we have to do like weathering, but we still have to remember that light is falling on this. Pretty strong light. So after I set up my stripes, I'm going to go back up to the top and I'm really going to fill in that. Valthorn, I use two different brands and it's the same brush size, but they're very different sizes because different brush brands and series will have very different sizes. So I go with Da Vinci, which my Da Vinci is almost worn off of its barrel now, but Da Vinci Maestro, and a Series 10, which is their standard round, and a size 1, and that's the smaller brush here. The bigger brush is a Raphael, that's that name. That's from France, whereas the Maestro is from Germany. This is an 8408 series, which is the pointed round, which is why it has a long, narrow, tapering tip. And it is also a size 1, as you can see, but much larger. So those I like brushes with very long tapering tips, and that's why I use these two series and brands. So size 1 is my standard go-to, as long as it has a good tip. And then for little stuff, I also use Da Vinci Maestro. The triple aught is as low as I go, is as little as I go. So if you get any of these brands in anything from a 1 to a 0 to whatever that next size down is, sometimes it's a 00, you'll get a good range. I don't go anything below this just because the paint tends to dry so fast on the brush when it gets tinier, and I like to have, a fair amount of painting time. But I also like these smaller brushes because I work with very thin paint, and sometimes it can improve speed in that you're not unloading your brush forever before you get to put paint on the model. But I do have a Giganto brush also that I just have started using for blocking in on bigger models and busts. And that is here in Monster Brush. Let me get Monster Brush. I'm very enamored of Monster Brush actually. So Monster Brush here is also has is a Raphael. It's a very new Raphael, you can tell because of the thing. This is an 8404, not an 8408, and the difference is very evident when you look at them. The one, see how thick it goes, and it only cuts in at the tip, like at the last minute. Whereas look at the long taper on this one. This is the difference between a standard round and a pointed round. And a lot of brush companies do those two shapes. They'll have a different number series for them, but it will be standard round and pointed round. The pointed round is going to have a much more narrow taper headed all the way to the tip. And the standard round may have a pretty full belly until it cuts in at the tip. If you have a style, which means you use thicker paint on a wet palette, the standard is probably going to work better for you. If you have a style where you use a lot of very thin paint and use a well palette, then probably the more narrow brush is going to work better for you and smaller ones. Because if you dip this Monster Brush into a very thin paint, it's going to slurp a ton of it up into the brush, and you will be unloading that sucker forever before you can do a good line. So, also this is a good example. All brushes are going to, your brush when it's dry or drying is not going to keep a perfect point. This does not mean that there is anything wrong with the brush. Nothing is wrong with the brush. What's important is when you get your brush wet, does it hold a perfect point then? If your brush is wet and it holds a perfect point, do get excess water out of it. But if it holds a great point this way, then your brush is fine. Don't freak out. if you're going to freak out, just put a little bit of hair conditioner in your brush when you're done using it at night, and it will, you know, be nice then when you pick it up in the morning and all you have to do is rinse it out. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, so those are the brush sizes I use. They're pretty standard for most miniature painters. Some people like a bigger brush that has a, you know, that has the thicker, bigger body, and some people like a smaller brush or a more tapered brush. And usually that's directly related to the type of palette somebody prefers to use and the amount of the thickness or thinness of their paint, the viscosity of their paint. So I tend to thin my paint a lot. I prefer brushes with a long tapering end. I don't use a wet palette, so I don't have to worry about wrecking my tip mixing. Yes, freaking out is pointless. Exactly. So yeah, essentially, because with thinner paint, you have to unload your brush a lot after you load it. Having a smaller brush or a brush that doesn't hold quite as much paint because it's long and skinny is actually a time saver and an advantage, because you'll get to the point where you can do fine lines with no puddles and all the control you could ever ask for, really, if you're using a smaller or thinner brush. Be much harder. It's much harder to control your paint when you thin a lot if you use a bigger brush or a fatter brush. But that sort of brush excels with thicker paint and tends to keep it wet in the brush for longer. So it's very much, I have found, it's a scientific thing. Many painters don't think about it. They just know what works for them. But, I mean, fluid dynamics is fluid dynamics, and it is the way things tend to work. So yeah, question what you are trying to do, the palette you like, whether you more often work with thicker paint or thinner, and how fast you want to paint. I mean, people like Sergio, who are very fast, work with much larger brushes, thicker paint, and then they use an airbrush to blend. So the smaller your brushes, the more time it's going to take you to paint things generally. Obviously, you're not covering as much ground. But it can help you if you're trying to concentrate on doing fine detail. A bigger brush really encourages you to kind of go fast and to not hesitate over fine details. But a tiny brush encourages you to do fine details because you can. So that's one of the ways I got better at mini painting, is I found that I tended to gloss over small details. And so I forced myself to paint with a very small brush for a while. Which slowed me down a lot, but it did actually make me pay more attention to the details because I found that I could hit them easier. And then when I went back to a bigger brush, I kept that awareness. So again, we're just doing some quick stripes just on either side. Go down to the size 1. Falthorn. The size 1 is, I mean, I don't know what your palette or your preferred way of working is. I could probably do a Series 10 size 2. It's probably close to my Raphael as far as size goes. But if it didn't have the tapering tip, then it would be a lot harder. But yeah, if you're having conniptions, my question is, are you trying to use it with really thin paint? And then it's just making you unload a lot, like you'll need to unload more, in which case then the answer is switch to a smaller brush. All right, everything is rounded. Great. Thin with a well palette. Yep. Yeah, and if you use deeper wells like I do, like make sure your paint puddles are at least 6 to 8 drops of paint. Often more for me. And then, you know, at like the 45-minute mark, I tend to drop an extra drop of water into a paint that's been mixed for a long time. It's actually been around an hour mark here for me, so these are both still fine. That one was about 6 or 7 drops of fluid. This one's about 8. But if you use deep amounts of, you know, good amounts of paint and water, the well palette will work fine for you. It's better if you have like smaller wells. So like I do this guy. I don't know if you've got what your palette is, but this guy's nice because it's, as you can see, the wells are very small. So it helps the paint to stay wet longer because it's less surface area exposed to the air. Oh, I forgot the shield. Need to get that. But yeah, use a smaller brush if you're using really thin paint. And it'll help you. You won't have to unload nearly as much to get your brush workable. Like right now, this is fairly thick paint, I would say. I'm unloading, maybe I'm doing 6 stabs on the side of the palette to unload it. The first one is very thick, Francis. It's probably about a 4-to-1. I think it's a 4 or 3. It's about a 3-to-1 actually, although it's thickened over time. That's why I got the heavy wash effect. So it was 3-to-1 on my base coat, which is why I got the heavy wash effect instead of a solid base coat. This one is, I'd say, about the same because I know the colors are very similar, so I didn't want to thin it too much. It might be closer to a 2-to-1 at this point. I wasn't keeping track. I wasn't keeping track exactly today. What's important is about them is, you know, you look at the difference between them. This one needs to be a little thin, but you don't want it too thin or it's just going to look invisible against that dark red. So I kept it a little on the thicker side. I'm going to go back to stippling on this shield surface because I can see there's irregularities here. But yeah, I mean, once you understand your paint consistency, you won't need to keep track every time you mix a highlight of how much water is in it. We'll do it until it looks right and acts right, and you'll just go. But in general, any highlight is going to start, usually it's going to start around 2-to-1. But with reds, which are really transparent, often I will go 3-to-1 on a first layer. After that, it depends. So I just did a little stipply thing here that's going to kind of set us up, see how it's kind of modeled. That's exactly what we did on this one. So we're going to essentially create kind of a scaly pattern on this and that. It's my plan. I'm setting it up with stippling. Back. There we go. Whew! That was way too close. You don't want to get that close to an ogre, trust me. All right, so now I'm going to block in, like I said, I'm going to block in this red highlight on the top of this. I don't want my shadow color to be on the top where the light is falling on this weapon. So for those who have been following my Patreon and the Pentads talk, you will know why. It is that your darkest shadow should never appear on the top surface unless there's like a really deep fold or a line. Essentially, lining can be used. Or you can use your shadow to line. But otherwise, you don't want your darkest shadow on the top of a surface. It doesn't make sense that it would be there. The light is shining right onto that surface. So everything will be generally lighter. All right, so now that's consistent. But yeah, so I would say that with reds, highlight consistency can start around 3-to-1. With almost all other paints, I would say highlight consistency should hover more in the 2-to-1 area to the 1-to-1 area, depending on how much white is in your paint. Lighter the paint, the thinner it needs to be. But that gives you a general range, which is really all you're going to get. I mean, You can't really target it more than that because every color changes. Just doing a little bit of extra to bring the red down just a little more on the back and the front, just to make sure I'm consistent here. But yeah, in general, the more transparent the color you are working with, the less water you will need to add to get a good highlight, and the more white you have, or the lighter the color you are working with, the more water you will have to add. Up to pure white, which requires a 2.5 to 1, or sorry, a 1 to 2.5 level of thinning. So you actually have 2.5 times as much water as you do paint if you're going to layer with pure white, which means 5 drops of water and 2 drops of paint. Which is a lot of water. But otherwise, pure white is too strong. So, too strong to blend nicely with layering anyway. If you're not layering, then by all means, you know, or if you don't care about, you want some texture, then you can leave it a little thicker. But, all right, so let's mix our next level. I'm curious how I want to do this. I was thinking I might use a skin color. I was thinking I might use Peachy Flesh, which is used to be Youthful Flesh, 9445. So I think I'm going to mix this up and see how it looks. If I like it, I might add another drop of the orange to it. If I feel like it fades out too much. Notice what I'm doing here, though. I'm using a very orange skin tone to work with these colors. Highlighting reds with skin tones is totally a workable way to do things. It tends to not pink out your red as much because you've got other colors in there, usually yellows, so it tends to go peachy instead. So if you want to highlight red with white or a color that is an off-white, but you don't want it to go too pink, think about reaching for a skin tone. And that particular skin tone is the one I would use. Oh, I grabbed the wrong red. Wow. Oxide Red, you just jumped into my hand there. Oxide was like, use me! And actually I could. There's a reason I reached for it apparently, because it is a pretty good highlight starter for that. I don't know that I want to go there though. That's adding in an entirely new color and it's really saturated. So maybe I'll do 2 mixes since Oxide Red magically jumped into my hand there. So I'm going to mix up. It's very close to the color I mixed. It's just more intense. And I don't really want intense necessarily. So I'm going to mix this up and I'm going to put a drop of Youthful Flesh in each, or Peachy Flesh. So we're going to use a drop of Peachy Flesh in each of these and see what we get. Playing around with highlighting reds with different colors today. Yay! I bet you thought I was going to go all boring. So this is Oxide Red, and this one is our previous mix. I'm just repeating it because I want to keep a bunch of this around. All right, so let's look at our Oxide. Whoa, that goes so very weird. Almost German orange, which is not a bad highlight for red, but it's missing. What this is missing is it's missing yellow. Like it is washing it out a bit and pinking it out a bit. It could use a little more orange. This one may have the same result. Let's see. This one holding its own, but it also could use more orange because it is pinking out a bit. So I'm going to drop another drop of orange in. That's orange brown, 9402, or sorry, 9201. Ugh. Mouth not matching brain today. Very distracted. I have to fit a lot into my day today, so I'm a distracted Anne. So that's a little better. It's not nearly as pink as that. It's still in the same family. Like, I can see why the Oxide is playing around. Now, just to show you, if I really wanted to punch this in the opposite direction, I was like, it's way too pink. I could add a drop of actual yellow. Let's grab Sun Yellow, which is a beautiful yellow. 9008. It's a muted coral, yeah. It is muted. So that's Peachy Flesh plus Oxide Red. But if I decided I wanted to punch it a little bit warmer, which I might because my light, remember, is very yellow here. And I drop some sun yellow into that. That's going to warm it up much more. See how it goes much more orange now. And that's pretty good highlight color, actually. That's what I was kind of aiming for. I may go with that, and we'll try transferring some of this over and dropping some yellow into it. There's a lot more paint in this one, so... I'm looking for a, yeah, kind of a faded red leather color. It's actually a lot more muted than that. It's not as pink as that bright skin, and it's a lot more muted. It's not really carrying over the interwebs, I guess, but if you added a lot of white to these colors, though, you might get something very similar to the midtone of the bright skin triad eventually. So these are all very similar colors now. I've warmed it up here. It's pretty much the same color. So this is where you can get to the same result, almost the same result, using two different pigments. There is no Oxide Red in Asmodius, and there is a tiny bit of Oxide Red in Orange Brown, to be fair. But there's certainly no Oxide Red in Sun Yellow. So it's interesting. You can get, it just shows you that Oxide Red is actually a red. Much as you may look at it and think it is an orange, it will act as a red when mixed with certain other pigments, and it will end up in the same range as colors with actual red in them. So I think I'm going to use, they're pretty much indistinguishable. Oh, let's use the oxide. Let's do it. Let's rock it and see what we can do with it. Now it's going to be pretty high coverage because oxide is high coverage. And this is a lighter color, you can see. That means we need to add more water. Because we do have some white in it, we added sun yellow. Sun yellow has white. And we also added peachy flesh. And peachy flesh has lots of white in it. It's built in a white base. That means adding more water. And then we'll see how this works. And if it feels like it's too light or too off, I'll go back to a more red color. But I will probably be building this up by adding sun yellow or something similar because of our really golden light source on this ogre right now. And I also need to glaze a little more with some more yellow here. Okay, mixing brush down, actual brush in hand. Been trying to paint with my mixing brush a little bit too much lately. All right, now I have a pretty thinned paint, and I think I want, let's try it out on the shield. So this is where we're thinking about going kind of scaly. Oh, this is really strong. So you can see how much the white in that affects it. It's really, really pale. Let's use this color and see what I get. I am tempted to do this though because I can use it as underpainting. This is also pretty bright. And how small you want to go with these little scale texture things is up to you and your brush control. I can do tiny micro dots with this brush, so I can go very small indeed. So what I'm thinking here, let me show you guys what I'm thinking. Let me grab some straight up Asmodius. What I'm thinking is if I bring up these colors, I can glaze with Asmodius and make the red brighten up again. So to have this work, you have to make it pretty bright, pretty light to have it work as underpainting. So I'm going to just do this over this area to see if I like it. But I'm going to get this kind of figured out first. There we go. So we've got some kind of like pebbly scale texture. Let's toss a red glaze over it. I want to see how it affects it. So that's straight up Asmodius. It is spot glaze just over those areas. Kind of use some water to smooth it out to the sides. It's going to knock down the texture. It's also going to blend it in and make it more red. So all this kind of stuff is stuff I muck around with when I'm painting. Like, I'll be like, oh, maybe it'll look cool if I do that. And I'll try it on a small piece and I'll decide if I like it or not. And then I'll work from there. And this is not too bad. I do feel like I did lose like a little bit of my subtlety, but like I went light very quickly here. So these scales are like definitely like popping out now. Now when I add highlights to these splotchy areas, I am making an effort to keep those highlights on the top as regards to where the light is coming from, the top of each of these splotches. Because if they really are scales and they're picking up the light, then they would be, you know, catching it on the edge closest to the light source. So even when you're doing, especially when you're just doing, you know, illusion effects, this is a flat shield more or less, and I'm just suggesting there's texture sculpted on it. You want to really know where your light is coming from. So it all comes back to light sourcing. So by thinning down this color a little bit, I got it a little bit more harmonious. Can also mix kind of a halfway mixture of my initial. This almost looks like chitin, like crab chitin, doesn't it? I like that idea. Unlikely to be made into a shield, but pretty cool. That's probably because I mostly did large or smaller bits instead of bigger texture, bigger scales. If I did bigger scales, it'd be more dragon or reptilian. It's pretty cool though. I like my texture. Now, if I want to really bring up the texture a little bit more, shake them very, very well. Oh, vortex, huh? Polished leather is a really kind of a transparent leather, Eric. I would mix a little bit of white into it and then do that as a coat, your base coat, and then just go over the top with polished leather normal. That's what, I mean, it's what oil painters and like normal acrylics users, tube paint users have to do to get coverage. They have to mix white in. It still works for our paint. Polished leather is very, it's a naturally transparent color. You can keep it from going patchy. I would always use white primer for one thing. I would always use a white undercoat with it. You can keep it by going patchy by thinning your base coat more. But if you don't want to do that, and you want, you know, coverage, you can still get 2-coat coverage by just mixing some white into it for your first coat and then just using it straight up for your second. Same thing with reds. If you ever have problems with reds and those covering, you can mix a tiny bit of white in, get coverage, and then go over the top with your red. You'll be fine. As far as metallics, though, to get better coverage with those, you need to undercoat with a dark color. So use a dark gray for silvers and steels. Use a dark brown or green or red or really whatever with gold or bronze colors. I showed that on on the bronze column that David completely stole from my table. But if you go and watch those videos, the reason that I'm undercoating with browns and dark greens and everything before I put my bronze color down is that the bronze color will otherwise be streaky and not cover. But if you put a dark color first, that's how those flakes are actually formulated to be used. When the manufacturer of the flakes sends us sample cards, they're done with a black background and a white background to show the difference, that they're really meant to be put over a very dark background for the flake to look shiny and to cover evenly. That's just how mica-based metallics tend to work. And when metallics don't have that usually you'll notice that's like darker metallics may cover better, but they maybe don't shine as much. And that's because extra pigment's been loaded in to get that color. And so that pigment gives you more coverage, but it also impairs the shininess of the flake. So you like have kind of, a trade-off there. So like some of our very dark metallics cover fantastic, but they don't have a lot of shine to them. So that's how and why that all works that way for metallics. And that trick will help with any metallic from any company. If you're not getting coverage, put down a dark color first. And then you'll notice a lot, like it's a lot better. I still thin my metallic base coat just a little bit, but by a little bit, I mean maybe 5 or 6 to 1. Like not much at all, because if you put too much water in there, it will separate. Again, that's the nature of the flake. The flake is mica. Mica is rocks, and if you put rocks in water, they sink. So when you disrupt the base too much, you'll see separation in your metallics. You can also add an agitator, yes, before you put them in the vortex. If you really feel like, if you're getting any clear fluid out of them, then they do need a better shake. But if they're just a little bit where the coverage isn't quite where it should be, I know polished leather especially is a very vibrant color, and because it's so yellow, and yellows tend not to cover, you're fighting that. So you're fighting that tendency to not cover. Yeah, this really looks like crab chitin. I kind of like it. It's a very pebbly shield. I'm going to put a little bit brighter colors up higher on the shield, or lighter, or both. And then I'm going to actually mix another highlight color. But yeah, polished leather, generally because of its high load of yellow, does not have great coverage because yellow. And I didn't add white to it because I wanted it to be more of a raw umber color, which is a color that also has very little coverage. All right, cool. You got it. Awesome. Yeah, I just usually, I'll use like rich leather and polished leather together. Rich leather being its friend that's very close to it in bones. I'll mix these together, put a drop of white in there and use that for a base coat, and just go over the top. Or I'll just do that with white and go over the top if I want this light of a color. When you do add white to polished leather, by the way, it can be a great base coat for yellows. Don't add too much though. I mean, when I say add white, I'm usually going 5 drops to 1, maybe 4 drops to 1. The more transparent the color is, the more effect that white's going to have on it. Like it's going to instantly hit it like with a baseball bat if it's a very transparent color. So you may want to use more of a 6 to 1 at that point. But yeah. So I'm going to mix one more highlight color, and I'm going to do that by adding yellow because I want these to be real warm because of the warm light falling on this guy. So we're going to grab our color here that we've been using, put a few drops into a new well. Boop. And then we're going to just add a drop of sun yellow. Let's see if that is enough to take it significantly lighter. We may need to add another drop of our skin tone if we want it to go a lot lighter. We don't just want it to be more yellow. We also want it lighter. I think that's going to be enough. You can see the light and dark contrast here, so I think it's going to be good enough. We'll try that. But yeah, I don't want to kill all the translucent colors because the minute you add opacity to them, it usually involves adding white or oxide pigments, and then you lose that brightness. You lose the vibrancy to them. It's a trade-off. So this gives you an idea how tiny I can get with my brush strokes with this. I can have just little tiny micro dots. And this is all unloading your brush with your paint at the right consistency and having a brush with a fantastic tip. Which is why I have painted with the Da Vinci Maestro Series 10 size 1 for my competition painting for over 20 years. Because once I break it in, this brush can do anything. This brush can do eyeballs, Tom Meyer models. I mean, not without a lot of cussing, but it can. So I've got some lighter highlights up here and some warmer highlights here, but I feel like I need to actually warm up the entire surface. So I'm going to do that by doing a glaze of yellow after I have these highlights in. Spending an awful lot of time on this shield, I know, which, you know, if he's just an ogre, so most people would not do. But it's an educational opportunity, so we're going to do it. I think I might actually glaze with this orange. So I'm going to take my highlight color that I have right here. I think I'm going to thin it down and maybe glaze with it. To raise, what that will do is to raise the lightness level on the top here and make it look significantly lighter, because you can see the light falling on it. So the real light from outside, that's from my window. I want that whole area to be lighter. So I'm going to grab a little bit of this orange and thin it down to a glaze level, which is colored water. Colored water. You still need to have some color in your water. I'm going to unload my brush, but not too much because I want it to actually put a whole level of paint over the top. Really quick, rinse out your brush, dry it off, come back, pull excess fluid off, and also use your damp brush to kind of feather that glaze in to either side so that you can blend it in. Now we're going to see if this glaze was enough once it dries. Still wet. One level may not have been enough. But you always want to do two. Instead of, you know, going overboard with one. So it did lighten the top of the shield. You can see it, actually. That's not just the light from my window anymore. But not a lot. And now I'm like kind of questioning, because the thing is, if you do light glazes, more than anything, it's really going to kill your darks very fast. So I'm going to lose a lot of the darks here. And I don't necessarily want to do that. So one other thing I could do is I could extra shade the bottom here. And I mentioned that this color shades really well with purple. So let's rock that. Let's go there. Where is a nice purple? No, not you. No, not you. Not dark enough. Well, maybe it's dark enough. Maybe we'll use Imperial. Imperial's a bit blue, but let's try it. It's not very dark, but I think that putting the cool shadow over the top will do the same effect. So we're just playing around with colors at this point. This is the episode where we play around with colors. Oh, nice. Very nice, Twisted Oma. All right, so we'll see how this works. We've got our Imperial Purple. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 drops. This is a 1 to 4, more or less. The paint drop was a little bit big, though. It was more like a drop and a half. So, glaze consistency. You should, like, it should never, as you put it on your palette, it'll never be quite full strength. It'll never be the full strength color, and it will be almost non-existent when you pull it out over the palette. This might even be a little heavy for a glaze, actually. Classic purple. The original purple and the original core line, Imperial. I'm going to use this the same way I used the orange, but I'm going to do it along the bottom. Rinse out the brush, come back, kind of feather in the edges, and wick off any excess paint from the edges usually, because the paint's going to pool around the edges. So that, now you definitely see a light to dark shift, don't you? And that's not just like that. That is not the way the light is coming from my window. That is actually, you can see the light and the dark. So, as I said, even though it's not as evident, you can totally see that the purple is a great shadow. Like, you don't see necessarily the purple itself. And if you wanted to, you'd have to really build this up. You'd have to do successive layers of glazes, maybe down here. Or you need to just layer in some purple to get it to really be strong as far as the purple goes. But if you're just using purple as a shader to make a more complex shadow, and in this case, it's also the complementary of the light color, which is very yellow. So it's a very good shadow for almost anything on this model in reality. But yeah, so that works just fine. So that's how you can glaze, how you can paint an entire surface the same, and then just use a couple of glazes to create your light and shadow and change the temperature and the color. And also the texture is showing up better up here and it's less good down here, which it should be. In the shadow, you wouldn't see the texture as much. So, fun. Well, you know what? Oh, wow, we're almost done with stream. Dang, that time went fast. We'll do a little bit more. Maybe I will go and actually take my walnut and set up the outer edge and the center there then. 1 second. Let me grab my walnut brown. Means that if I really want this to look scaly though, over here, I probably do need to actually do some lining to separate out my scales. Because it didn't quite turn out. It looked more like chitin and less like scale on the shield. Because I didn't have those hard lines between them. I could put those lines in after the fact, but it would probably be difficult because you got to draw those thin lines between all those little details you already did. It would be annoying. Better to start with that. I'm going to do just a 3-to-1 with this walnut because we're using it as a base coat and a liner. Aw, thanks, Eric. I really appreciate it. I'll send you an email a little bit if I get to it today, otherwise probably tomorrow. I send an email to everybody who joins, asking you if there's anything in particular you would like to learn. But yes, thank you. Awesome. I hope you like the content. There is a lot of it because I've been doing it for over 3 years now. A lot of content. I probably should put a blast out on my socials again to tell people, hey dudes, I've got a Patreon and there's a lot on it now. Alrighty. So I'm going to just block in anything that's going to be metal. Just going to paint right over it. This is why I kind of ignored it earlier. Sometimes I block these things in beforehand, but it's just an organic process. Now, the other thing that's going to get blocked in are these tiny little studs. See them? So now you need to load up your brush and unload it. You want to unload your brush until you can see a nice point on it. But you still want to get the paint in there. Because you want to pretty much cover up every one of those little tiny studs. And if you get a little outside the line, that's actually good. You're just going to leave that as lining around the stud. But paint the dark over the stud. Again, this is a 3-to-1 mix. Paint to water, walnut brown. Yeah, hopefully we can manage to do next week with no technical difficulties. And I believe the stream goes on Monday. So, hey, if you have the day off for Martin Luther King Day, lucky you, you can tune in and watch and even paint along if you want. And then when you run into a question and whatever it is you're painting, you can ask on stream and I will answer. But yeah, so that'll be, we'll be back on Tiefling. And Tiefling, we were doing some, contemplating some freehand on the Tiefling, as I recall. There. So essentially putting in all those little studs in the dark means that when I go over them with the white and the metal color, it's actually going to read. These are so tiny that if I tried to do that against the background of these orange highlights especially, it might just all blend in, especially if I'm going to do them like an NMM, like brass kind of color, gold kind of color, right? So putting a dark, essentially just filling them in dark, makes them essentially built-in, gives them built-in lining. There's some really tiny details on the edge of the shield too. There's tiny little rivets. So we'll be doing some very small detailing on this big chunky ogre. You'd never imagine you'd find tiny, tiny detailing, but we are going to have it. Yeah, when we started, we did, Pendrake. My interwebs were riding the roller coaster of good to not good. Wasn't ever as bad as it was yesterday, but it was pretty stop motion at times. We were definitely channeling the spirit of Harryhausen. Or the Clash of the Titans dude. All right, there we go. So we've got it blocked in, and that's nice. That actually makes our red show up a little bit nicer now that we've got a rim around it that's a little bit different. And from here, I would underpaint it in white and then start my NMM colors. And this may seem like a lot of work to do for a little shield on an ogre. And you're right, you could do it much faster, obviously. But since we paint to the high end kind of gallery model end on this show, if you want to do your ogre to that level, I am here to show you. Plus, of course, you can use these tricks on any other model that you might be painting to a nice high level. There, all right. Yeah, the interwebs has been a little wonky. Where is my... Oh no, I have pearl white out here. That's fraught with peril. Never leave your pearl white out on your desktop. You may grab it instead of pure white, and suddenly you'll have shiny. Also, it won't work as well. So let's grab our white. Get our underpainting on, since we have a little extra time. I can't go too late today. My back has been a little bit wonky, but I will go a little late because we started a little late and we lost yesterday. You know what? I usually do a 2-to-1 for underpainting. So 4 drops of white, 2 drops of water. Well, that's comforting. That's not just us. All right, so now we show you why we did the little rivets. So essentially, if you tried to line around each of these tiny rivets, you would go nuts. I used to go nuts before I realized that there was a much easier way, and the easier way is donuts. It is always easier when you are trying to paint a ring around something to just make a bigger blob and then put a littler blob inside of it, therefore making a donut. So in this case, we're doing reverse donuts, black donuts, the donuts that shall not be named, because we're putting a white dot on the inside instead of painting a white donut with a dark dot on the inside. So we thinned our white 2-to-1 paint to water. Because pure white is a glorious thing, it will still cover. And we're going to essentially have to unload our brush a lot so that we could do tiny dots. And we're going to hit those rivets. And when we hit them, we're going to leave a little bit of that black around the outside and make a tiny donut. So it looks like we spent time actually lining each of these rivets, and it is a lie. Absolutely a lie. It is just a trick. You are just making donuts. This is also how, if you are painting Eldar Harlequins, if you want to do polka dots and rings, you just do rings. You just put a blob. If you're doing pink pants with a blue ring with pink inside of it, you just do the pink pants and then you put a blue circle, and then you take, usually you'll have to underpaint with some white. So you might take white and put a white dot inside your blue circle and then paint it pink like the pants. And that's how you do. And then everybody will go, oh my God, you painted those perfect concentric rings. How did you do it? And you will smile and go, haha, it's my secret. Or if you're very nice, you'll teach your friends. But you're just making donuts. Just make donuts. It's easy. And then when I go over these with a yellow color, they will look like they are gold and casting a shadow because they have lining around them. So much easier than trying to outline a tiny thing. And if you recall, this is exactly the way I do eyeballs, right? We paint in the whole eyeball, then you do the white, and you just leave the line around the outside as much as you can. And it's easier than trying to line your eyeball. So, donuts. Just do donuts. I haven't had a donut in a very long time. There we go. And then we will further do this by painting this ring and leaving the dark in the cracks. We will create an even larger donut. And yes, before you ask, we could actually just paint this entire thing white and then paint black inside of it and then paint the next ring in white and then paint the next thing in black and continue making donuts all the way till we get to the little stud on the center of this shield, which I think is actually bone. So I'm probably going to paint it that. But it's got 2 concentric rings before it gets there because Bobby Jackson. Hashtag blame Bobby. Like, there's detail and then there's detail. So there's a circle and then there's another circle. And then there's that spike in the middle of the shield, which appears to be separate, which I'll probably paint in a bone color. But yeah, so doing this is a lot harder than doing donuts. And if I were smart and not trying to save time, see, I really blorfed up the bottom and top of that donut. Now I have to line it. It would have been so much easier if I just would have painted the whole thing white and then painted it dark a little smaller and then white a little smaller and then dark again. Donuts. This is what I want you to take away from this stream. Whenever you are doing a ring around anything, donuts. Unless you have my brush control. And if you do, wow, you are a lucky person. It's one of my finer attributes, is my insane brush control. So, it allows me to touch up these things. But if you don't, please, just donuts. Donuts are much easier. The donuts technique was taught to me a long time ago by a guy who did actually paint Harlequins, by the way. I don't even remember his name. He was very much a gaming painter. I met him in Southern Illinois. And he had Harlequins with rings on the pants. And I was like, oh, nice rings. And he's like, oh, it's easy. It's just donuts. Actually, it didn't say donuts. He described it to me. And I was like, donuts. So he did not come up with the donut name, but he did show me how to do it. And it is applicable to many shapes. If you need an outline, a thin outline around anything, it makes much more sense to paint the whole thing and then paint another thing inside of it. Yeah, for eyes, I mentioned earlier quantum. I use it for human eyes. Because you want a little bit of a rim around them. And now I do have brush control, so I am going in and touching up my concentric circles. And this can either be good practice or maddening, depending on where you are in your brush control journey. So that's nice and neat and cool. I'm going to leave that center dark, though, because that's going to be bone colored eventually, and I don't want to accidentally paint it gold. If I paint it the same way as all the rest of this stuff, that's going to be gold. Then I'll need to worry that I'm just going to automatically paint it because I'm not thinking, I'm talking on stream. Often I will kind of automatically paint when I'm on stream, so I have to watch it. I have to leave visual cues for myself if I'm not going to want to, like leaving that break in the shield right there. If anyone is leaving this stream not craving donuts, you are stronger than me. Yes. Yes, indeed. Even I am slightly craving those tasty baked goods at this point. So we'll just stop saying that. Although to be fair, there are things that I do love more, like a good croissant, especially a pain au chocolat, which is chocolate-filled croissant. Those are, and I love a good scone. Yeah, let's just talk about all the baked goods we shouldn't eat, but that are super tasty that we love anyway. Let's just talk about that. David does not like Britishy scones. He likes American scones that are more moist. And I like the buttery, crumbly Britishy scones that are meant to be dipped in your coffee or tea. Especially a lovely orange flavored one. Couldn't taste them. Sorry, War Shadow. I'm so sorry. So I'm going to be filming, I mentioned a new YouTube series, which is free. Very short videos on the fundamentals of mini painting. And the last one was the wash video. But this month, today I'm going to be shooting the next one, which is actually how to make your own wash with Master Series. Sorry, I got a hair caught in my brush. 1 second. I think it lost a hair and then the hair caught in it. I think it's good now. There we go. Sometimes you just have to pay attention to your brush for a moment when you have a hair sacrifice itself. But yeah, so that'll be up on the 1st or around the 1st of the month coming up. And my patrons get it 2 weeks early. But it's my Painting Big YouTube. And so we've got a base coat one and a wash one up right now. And I'm doing one a month. So by the end of the year, we should have quite the catalog of fundamental techniques. Wanted to do this just to kind of have a basics offering out there for if you have a friend who's just starting in the hobby, they can just go watch, not even an hour's worth of videos and get a good grounding in it. The interesting thing is that even though these topics are very, very, some of the easiest things we do as painters, I found there were some tips and tricks and just finer points about them that would give you more success if you use them. And so that's kind of what I'm doing this for, is I'm breaking down really the fundamentals of how I do it. And hopefully it will help people avoid some common pitfalls. Yeah, scones are tasty. We have a very, very good local pastry shop called The Midwife and the Baker that is actually walking distance from our home. David goes on Saturdays. I resist most times. But the same bakery does pastries for the coffee shop that I go to write every other Sunday. So I have been known to give into the call of the orange scone. because orange cranberry or orange, actually orange currant is usually what they're doing, orange black currant. I love croissants. If there is a single glutinous thing that I miss from going gluten-free years ago, it is croissants. And every once in a while I will allow myself a croissant because just tasty. Just tasty. All right. So then when you get to this point, you're going to be doing your donuts again, except, you know, you did a giant mega donut and now you're going to be doing a tiny donut. So you're going to once again, if you want this level of contrast, you'll be going over these tiny rivets. Thanks, Bobby. Hashtag thanks, Bobby. Just take those old thanks Obama memes and just put Bobby Jackson in there instead for this one. Tiny little rivets. So I'm going to be doing tiny little black dots on my tiny little rivets because Bobby Jackson. Reconsidering my Bobby Jackson fangirl status right now. Seriously, Bobby, who does this? Tiny little rivets. But if you want your tiny little rivets to show up, then do another set of donuts. Sadly, Bobby doesn't stream. Like, he's too busy actually working. Or you could totally do that. Has Michael talked him into going on Crow's Nest? Have they had Bobby on Crow's Nest? Anybody know? Because Bobby would be perfect. Dear Bobby, it's not me, it's you. Now keep in mind, I am actually a Bobby Jackson fangirl, so this is mostly said in jest, but part of me is really rolling its eyes internally. Going, who needs all these tiny little rivets? Oh, he asked about, okay, yeah. I was going to say, Bobby is an obvious choice. He is highly entertaining. I think my brush has finally given up the ghost, guys. I'm getting some definite hair breakage. Here, let's just show you guys what this looks like. See it? Yeah, a couple hairs there. So hair breakage, when it breaks off at the end, and you see that, stop a bit and try to gently use your fingernail to kind of peel it away from your brush so that you can continue. Now you can see that my brush is thinned down. If I found you a, let's see if I have one. Do I have a standard? Do I have a fresh Da Vinci? Maybe. This one's a little worn down too. My brushes tend to thin as they get used. I have a lot of Da Vinci's around here. Dang. Oh, I've got 0 Raphael. I should bring that out. Trying to find an example for you guys. 1 second. If I can't find one, then I'll just give it up. Nope, that's Raphael 0 too. I like Raphael 0s, but I need a Da Vinci that isn't, like, broken. This is also a Da Vinci that is, but it's fatter, so you'll be able to see. All right, so fresher brush on the right. Anne has been using this brush for Forever Brush on the left. Yes, I do, but you never, ever, ever, ever pull them out. You use a knife, and unfortunately my knife is in the other room, but you take the knife, you separate out the hair, you pull it down to the ferrule, and then you press and nick the hair off right at the ferrule. I do not find that I need to, like, most of the time they're just going to come out. Like, normally a hair doesn't get caught in the brush like it did there. Normally I just lose hairs as I go and I hardly notice. I don't find that my brushes splay too often because I rinse them so compulsively that I don't really get paint in the ferrule. So this brush you can see has really, really been worn down. You can see the number of hairs I'm losing. This, when it gets to this point, it's really useful for tiny, tiny micro stuff. But it's a hair, see what I did there? A hair or two from going too far, where it's just no longer useful. It will definitely thin down to the point where it is just no longer useful. But right now, I can do like amazingly tiny details with this brush. So, oh no, yeah. Some people, and I don't know if it has to do with rinsing or usage, but brushes wear in different ways for different people, and it's got to be the way that you use it. I've got to think. It's got to be something about the style or the way that you use it. Rhonda finds that her brushes do what mine do. They thin over time. She doesn't lose the point ever, but they just get so skinny that eventually they have no body left and they have no spring, so they're useless. So essentially, when this brush no longer snaps back to its shape if I bend it, when it just stays curved, then I've lost too much hair integrity and then it's dead. But until that point, when it gets to this point, I can do some amazingly tiny detailing with it. So maybe I should do some insane freehand on something coming up and use that brush. It takes a long time for me to get them to this point too. Like hundreds of hours, hundreds of hundreds. So it really, it varies depending on the person I find. And some people lose the tips and some people thin. And I'm not sure what makes it go one way or the other. Alrighty, I think that's good. I think we can stop there. I went nice and late, so we made up some time, but now I need to like get out of this chair and stretch and take my walk and do other things for the day, work on some Patreon stuff. So what we did today is we talked about base coating red, putting a first highlight on it, using a stippling stroke as opposed to not using a stippling stroke, and why it, what it can do. We talked about getting a good base coat on transparent colors. We highlighted up the shield, kind of made it look, like scales or chitin. And we talked about underpainting for tiny details to make things go. And we talked about donuts. Dang it. Donuts. So yeah. Yeah. 3 years old. Yeah. 3 years is good. I mean, considering how many crappy brushes you would have gone through in that time, it's still a good investment. All right, Reaperland at 3 p.m. Central. I am going to go off and take my walk. You guys have a fantastic weekend. And thank you, Eric, again for subbing to my Patreon. And you all have a fantastic day. All right, we'll see you Monday when we work on the tiffling.